This is episode 23 of Entrepreneurs for a Change. If you like this podcast, please subscribe to our mailing list at entrepreneursforachange.com. Are you ready to be the change? If so, you've come to the right place. You're about to join a movement of entrepreneurs who are empowering people, saving the planet, and turning their passion into profits while creating the lifestyle of their dreams. If you don't believe us, check out our website at entrepreneursforachange.com, a place where you can be inspired, mentored, and supported by a tribe of change-making entrepreneurs just like you. Hello, beautiful changemakers. This is Lorna Lee, host of Entrepreneurs for a Change, a web show about entrepreneurs who are changing the world through business and designing the lifestyles of their dreams. Ever feel like starting a business is like throwing spaghetti on the wall to see what sticks? I've interviewed nearly 50 entrepreneurs to date, and most of them had at least one, if not many, business failures in their lives. Some were low-key failures that just ended up eating a lot of time, but fortunately did not result in financial ruin. Others were massive crash-and-burn failures that cost a buttload of money, theirs as well as their investors, while sending the founder into credit card debt. One of the key challenges for entrepreneurs is learning how to fail quickly to ensure that your precious time, energy, and resources aren't being wasted on a business idea that's going nowhere. But it's so hard to know if your endeavor is a tire kicker or if you're just on the threshold of success. So, how do you determine whether or not you should move on or keep powering through? Enter the art of startup validation, strategies and tactics to test whether or not your market truly wants the products or services you offer before you go out and build it. But how well do these strategies actually work? Dan Norris, co-founder of WP Curve, is a serial entrepreneur who has launched several businesses, including software products and a private community. He talks about 4 common startup validation strategies. 1. Running surveys and focus groups. 2. Pre-selling your product before building it. 3. Buying traffic using Facebook ads and AdWords to test your product idea. 4. Building a minimal viable product. And some of the common pitfalls of each. In this interview, he'll talk about the beauty of recurring income and how entrepreneurs can create enough value to prevent customer attrition. The challenges of leveraging a private community as the value driver for a recurring revenue business. Why giving lifetime access as a product launch strategy doesn't validate anything. Why buying traffic to validate your business idea won't necessarily give you the market feedback you want. The 1 startup validation strategy he actually endorses. And much, much more. Show notes and links to all the awesome resources Dan shares can be found on entrepreneursforachange.com/23. Now, before diving into the interview, I want to encourage you to rate, review, and download Entrepreneurs for a Change on iTunes. This really helps us reach more people with inspiring stories of entrepreneurs who are changing the world. Also, if these stories inspire you to start a world-changing business of your own, head over to our website at entrepreneursforachange.com and download the Business Changemakers Toolkit to get a jumpstart today. Now on to the show. So Dan, I'm so glad to have you with us on Entrepreneurs for a Change, especially with all your experience about startup validation. So I'd love to, first of all, thank you for starting a company that has been a huge help to me in my business, and that is WP Curve. You guys, I don't know how much time and frustration you've saved me through your service, but y'all are like so fast and you get the work done so well, and I'm amazed. So thank you so much, Dan.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm glad to be here as well. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, so Dan, please tell our audience who you are and what you do.
Well, my name's Dan Norris. As you mentioned, I've got a company called WP Curve. I started that 7 months ago. And for the 7 years before that, I started lots of other companies, none of which did particularly well. I guess I'm an entrepreneur and I've got a couple of different things on the go, but WP Curve is our main focus at the moment because it's sort of the first thing we've done that's really hit a nerve with people and started to grow the way we wanted it to.
So Dan, tell me, how many businesses have you launched before you finally nailed upon a model that actually seems to be successful?
Well, it probably depends on how you define a business, but I've tried lots of different things. I don't know how many. Lots.
Okay, so according to the IRS in the United States, the Internal Revenue Service, if you're not generating income in 2 years, it's a hobby. However, many of us entrepreneurs know that sometimes you got to try a number of different things, and for a while it might qualify as a very expensive hobby, and either it's going to take or it isn't going to take. So I guess of all the different things you've worked on, which ones were the most successful?
Well, I mean, everything I've worked on's earned some amount of money, but the problem has really been how do I get it to the next stage? And so before 18 months ago, I had a web agency just building websites for people. And I mean, it was a proper business. I think we were doing probably almost 200 grand a year, and I had staff and an office and things, but I just wasn't really able to grow it any bigger than what it already was in terms of the profit. So I tried a bunch of things. We'll probably talk about that a little bit later in terms of things I've tried since then. But WP Curve is definitely the most successful thing we've done, even though it's only been going 7 months. It's already more profitable than my last agency that was going for 7 years. And we've already got more customers. We've got more recurring revenue. We've got much higher growth and a much better business model that grows, that's sort of built to grow. And we've also got a bigger and a better team. So, yeah, WP Curve already is my best company.
Okay, so tell me, in terms of your success criteria, are there specific key performance indicators that you would say were important to you in order to define what successful business actually is? So, I mean, it seems like, your previous web agency, I mean, it was, generating income. I mean, $200,000 a year is, pretty good for a lot of, small, boutique web agencies. It's not like a Saatchi & Saatchi, for example, but, a lot of people, might be very happy. A lot of entrepreneurs might be really happy with a business that is clearing 6 figures. But for you, it seems like that wasn't working for you. So can you share with us why and what level were you wanting to achieve in terms of that would allow you to say, oh, this is actually successful?
Right. Well, I mean, I would have been happier if I got to keep all of that $200,000 every year.
I see. Okay.
So, I mean, that's just revenue, and I had expenses. So I think I used to earn about 40 grand as a wage every year.
Wow. So you were billing 200 grand, but then after all your expenses, you cleared 40 grand in profit.
Yeah. So what happened was in my first year, I billed around $40,000 and I kept all of it. And then as I tried to grow, I really failed to grow the profit. I only really grew the revenue. And what I really wanted to do was consistently grow profits. And what I also wanted to do was spend all of my time doing stuff that I love doing. And I wasn't doing either of those two things, and I couldn't figure out a way to do it. So I sold the company and started again from scratch. So in terms of success criteria, from a business point of view, I want to have a bit of an impact. So I want to have thousands of customers. I think eventually I want to be doing millions in revenue, because I think that would be a substantial business that impacts a lot of people. And I want to have a big team of great people and a big community around our business as well. Like, we are pretty big on content and community. So none of that stuff was really happening with my last business. And also I want to spend every minute of every day doing what I love. And none of those things were happening with that business. And we're sort of on the way to that with the current business, I feel.
Yeah, I think that is something that most entrepreneurs try to achieve, right? I mean, we want to be able to focus on we want to be able to play in our zone of genius, right? We want to be able to focus on the thought leadership, making the high-level strategic partnerships, coming up with a big vision, not on execution.
Yeah, I mean, I think people prefer doing different things. I don't know if I like that many of those things either. My co-founder certainly does. I like doing content, and I like sort of building the products and strategizing and writing processes, not following them, but writing them, building the team. I like all of that stuff, and I don't really enjoy doing the kind of day-to-day work and going out and having coffees with people, trying to convince them to buy a website. And that was the kind of work that I really needed to be good at with the last company, but I don't need to be good at with this company. So I think just, finding, whether that's what you call it or whether it's just like finding a way to match up what you're good at, what you love doing, and also what people are prepared to pay you for. I was close before, but I just didn't quite get it, but I think I've got it now.
Okay, so can you tell us what exactly WP Curve does. And I know you guys are fairly transparent in terms of how much income or revenue the company generates online. So I think you refer to it as monthly recurring revenue. So if you don't mind sharing, some of your milestones, 7 months is really not that long. I mean, I think a lot of people would be overjoyed to achieve a level of business success that you guys have achieved in only 7 months. So please tell us what exactly you guys do and how much your income you're earning right now.
Right, yeah. So it's small WordPress fixes, and we do unlimited fixes for $69 for a monthly subscription. So our customers pay us every month. And for some customers, it means doing 1 or 2 fixes. For others, it might mean doing 9 or 10 fixes one month and 4 or 5 the next month, or whatever it is. But across the board, it sort of averages out. And we do small 30-minute fixes or jobs, which means we can have pretty good processes around those things. It means we can build a team, and we can have that team do most of the work, and me and Alex sort of oversee it, but we don't have to be kind of going out and talking about every single project. It means 100% of our business is recurring, which means it's growing and very stable. In terms of milestones, the first week I had 10 customers. The first 23 days we passed our cost, not including, we didn't pay ourselves a wage for the first probably 4 or 5 months. But after 23 days, I think we had 20 or 30 customers, which was enough to pay for sort of one developer and hosting and whatever else we were spending money on in Infusionsoft. And now we're up to, I think, 12,000 a month and about 200 customers. So
wow, so when you guys launched, how did you get your first customers?
From the Dynamite circle.
Oh my God.
I put a thread in there. It's still in there. If you search for Live Ninja or something or live WordPress live chat or something like that, there's a thread in there. It's pretty funny because I kind of put it in there wanting some advice on the idea, and it was the response was a little bit lukewarm.
That's amazing, because I would have been overjoyed. I'd be like, oh my God, sign me up right now. Because let me tell you, every time I do have to go through any number of these small little fixes, I spend hours on it. Okay, so the process is figuring out what needs to be fixed and then speccing it out in Odesk and then trying to find someone competent that will fix it and not mess up my website or turn it into a link farm on Odesk. And managing that project, making sure they get it done right. And if it's not getting done right, why? So, right now the whole process is so painless and easy with WP Curve. So
I think because it's an entrepreneur's forum, I think everyone gives you advice from an entrepreneur's point of view. So it wasn't so much that, no, I wouldn't use this service. It's no, it's a bad idea. You can't do unlimited. It's going to be too expensive. How do you do 24/7 and all that kind of stuff, which is fine, except at the time I really, I was 2 weeks away from running out of money pretty much and having to get a job. So I had to launch it no matter what people said anyway. So I just launched it anyway.
Oh my God, the threat of having to get a job is enough to put the fire under your ass, right? No, anything but that.
Yeah. So I got a few signups from the DC, which is cool. And then I just emailed. I've been doing a lot of content, building an email list, and a lot of the original customers came from there. And then we just tried to do a good job with them and tried to get them referring and doing a lot more content. It just kind of snowballed from that.
Okay. Wow. So it's really cool to see how many people have actually started their businesses using the Dynamite Circle community as their way to validate a business idea.
Well, yeah, we'll talk about validation later on. I think what I did right is launch quickly, and that's sort of my thing now is when we're launching new products or ideas, we don't validate before we launch them. We launch them, and then afterwards we look at who's paying us, and we don't pay attention to anything else other than that. And that's why this worked, because I didn't believe any of the stuff that happened beforehand. I only believed when people started paying me or they stopped paying me, and that sort of taught us what to do next. Okay,
so you do ready, fire, aim, I guess, rather than ready, aim, fire.
Yeah.
Okay. So once you launch and get out of the gate, then essentially you get a handful of customers and then build your product or service based on what it is your handful of customers is telling you they need. Is that correct?
Yeah, or do you even have a handful of customers, or do you have lots of customers, and are they happy to pay you? Are they getting on Facebook and raving about your service, or are they just kind of paying you and not using it? And just everything that happens after that actually happens by somebody who's giving you money is real data from real customers, and it's something that you should pay attention to. But anything that happens before that is just assumptions. And all of the mistakes I've made in the past, I've pretty much tied back to making them because I've been making decisions based on assumptions, not based on real customer data.
It's really kind of tough, I think, to make business decisions in a certain way because, when you're looking at market research models, right, there's a lot of value in terms of getting a sample set that is large enough to make a statistically valid or decision, for example. And so I guess the question is one of the common ways to validate a business idea is to run a survey. Okay.
Terrible idea.
Oh my God. I want to hear your experience about running surveys. And
all right,
then we can talk about other business validation models. Okay, but
we can talk about it all day if you want. I can tell you why all of them are a bad idea.
Okay, great. So surveys, all these, you learn in school. You take a business class, you learn about market research. The internet marketing gurus all say survey your list. So tell me, how did that work for you?
It didn't work at all for me, but I think what I'd say in general to that is the Steve Jobs things where he talks about focus groups and the fact that people don't know what they want until you show it to them. And that advice is dangerous for entrepreneurs because it kind of makes you think, I can just go out and be innovative and create something awesome and people will buy it. But it's also very sensible because what it says is it doesn't really matter what people say to your surveys or in your focus groups because it will be totally different than what they actually do when you ask them for money. And that was my experience. I surveyed a bunch of well-known content marketers and asked them if they would buy a product that told them what content was converting. More than half of them said they either would or they weren't sure. And I think something like 75% of them said that they were doing a lot of content, investing significant amounts of money in it, and they didn't know if it was actually generating business for them.
Okay.
And so to me, that was okay, that's it, I've done my validation.
Right, yeah, it's a big pain point, right? We're all, told that content is king, and then especially if you're a small business or solopreneur, the whole process of creating content can be a full-time job. I mean, I personally find that I am, it takes a lot out of me to keep up with my editorial calendar. So, that's the problem is the pain point there that you're describing is not the fact that you're not getting enough revenue from your content. It's just the fact that you don't have enough time to do all the content or you don't want to spend your time on doing the content. You don't see it as valuable. So the pain point, or maybe you're not getting a quick enough return for your content. It could be 1,000 different things. Right.
But you won't be able to tell me in what that is in a survey response, for one. But the second problem is, you can't really predict how you would react. And that's the problem, is all these people sort of thought, okay, yes, it's a pain point for me, like you just did. But then when I sent them the beta to sign up and sent them the button to pay, none of them paid.
How many people answered your survey and said that they would buy, and then how many people actually bought?
I'll probably have to dig it up, but it was 30 or 40 people. None of them bought. Mm-hmm. And I think about half. So there was a bunch of questions in there. I specifically asked, would you buy this if I solve the problem? Which is a tough question to ask because people don't really know what your solution is going to be like. So it's almost like a pointless question to ask. But I think something like 10 or 15 people out of that list told me they would. But the funny thing was a huge percentage of the people never tried the product. So these are people who told me they have this problem, but then they didn't even try the product. And what that tells you is people are a very bad judge of what their problems are and how they're going to behave. And that's why, and you are for yourself as well. I thought as a content marketer, wow, this would be really awesome to know what return on my content is. Am I a very good predictor of what I would actually do? Had I previously signed up for a content marketing analytics app? I hadn't. So doesn't that tell me that I don't think it's actually a very big problem? Whereas I felt it was a big problem, but if it was a big problem, I would have tried to solve it before. So that's the risk of surveying people. It's people don't really, they're kind of out of touch with how they would actually behave and what their core problems are. And once you ask them to take their wallet out, the people who do take their wallet out are the ones you really should be listening to. But the people who don't, they're not really worth listening to in terms of validating your idea.
Yeah, totally. I just know that when I launched my survey, I got 100 respondents, which is pretty good, statistically speaking. 9 of those respondents actually bought the product. But I spent weeks slaving away to create that product. And I was just I can't live off of this.
What was the product?
It was a product about mentorship. So, my audience, they basically indicated that the one thing that they really wished that they had more of was mentorship. And so I created a product on how they could attract the right mentors, to help them in their business, because, it's really hard to say, okay, well, I've got a solution, X, Y, and Z person should be your mentor, or I can be your mentor, because every person's, business and industry is kind of, different. So, I found that I've attracted a lot of great mentors in my life, but I went through a process of like figuring out who was a great mentor for what, and who could help me for how long versus, basically, like, I pay business coaches. There's other peers that help me, but I have to be very respectful of their time. There are mentors everywhere, essentially. But I think, like, for a lot of people who feel very alone, especially if they're a solopreneur, it's easy to feel like you're just trying to do everything yourself. And there's actually help around you at all times. So, I think the product, could have more potential still, but I think I got really burnt out on the amount of effort it took me to create the first beta, and whether or not I could actually see myself continuing to, generate, like, a viable income off of it.
Is it recurring or a one-off download?
It was like a one-off download. It was a one-off.
What was the price point?
The starting price point was $17, and it was a series of audio recordings.
Yeah, well, there's a few things there. One is just the simple fact that a $17 one-off purchase is a totally different thing. See, when you're billing someone, like we're doing $70 a month, which is...
That's the beauty of recurring income. How do you do something where it's like you have a subscription-based model where the people actually feel like it's worth keeping their payments going? So one of the questions that I'm trying to resolve is, okay, I'm in the process of building a membership site because I have a lot of content that's useful to my audience. But then how do I keep driving or offering value whereby the members feel like they're getting something out of the monthly recurring, or prevent them from paying just like for the first month, downloading everything and then, exiting? Like, how can I offer continued value? So do you have any advice on how entrepreneurs can do that, can, set up recurring revenue streams?
Yeah, lots of advice. Well, it depends on a lot of things. The first thing I'd say is getting someone to sign up to recurring is a totally different thing than selling a one-off product. Like, a one-off product might be a good idea to validate that they are prepared to spend money and they're not just totally wasting your time. But to build a business out of a $17 product is very, very difficult. Once you go down the recurring path, you'll find you have a whole new set of challenges. And for one is just getting people to sign up, because people don't want to sign up for an ongoing fee for something. So you rule out 99% of your audience. And that's fine, because it means that you deal with the 1% who are prepared to pay you every month. But yeah, something like communities, we have a community as well, and we're going through the same. It's a really hard business to work with, a community, because what you described is a little bit different to a community, but it's got those aspects. The churn rate tends to be pretty high, and people are constantly getting invoiced and reminded that they're paying for the service, and they really need to be using it, which I think with WP Curve, what we're doing retention wise is to make sure that people are using it, and we're getting really smart about that now. We've only just started to realize that there's people who haven't used it for a couple of months, and those are the most likely people who are going to churn. So we're going to really make sure people are using. With a community, it's not all in your control. A lot of it's in the hands of the members, and a lot of people just don't activate in communities. They sign up thinking it's a good idea, and then they just, for whatever reason, don't activate, which makes it, I think, a much harder business model. So
how are you guys attempting to continue to offer value month after month in your community? What are some of the ideas that you are implementing on that?
Well, our focus at the moment is, so we do, every 2 weeks, we do a call with an entrepreneur. So this week we talked to Chris Ducker and we talked to Sean Ellis, Sean is the guy who came up with the term growth hacking. And he was responsible for the growth at companies that are multiple billion-dollar companies like Dropbox and other companies. So some of these dudes are pretty sort of well-known entrepreneurs. So we have a call every 2 weeks where the members can come on and join that. And we also have an online community which we're trying to kind of get more active. But it's just a challenge. It has a lot to do with how many members you have too. So I think the other thing we're trying to do is just make a really strong push to get more members, because we sort of feel like we need to hit about 100 members before it becomes a really active community. Yeah, I think it's a pretty tough business model, and I think it's like something that you probably shouldn't attempt unless you've got a reasonably big audience. I don't know if ours is big enough. I think we were probably right on the cusp, but I think something like a community, you probably need a reasonable audience, and you need people who are going to be active, and you probably need at least 100 members, I reckon, because I've found that well under half will be active, regularly active in there. And with our calls, we're probably getting 10 to 20% of members turn up to those. So really you need, I mean, if you had 100 members, you're only talking about sort of 30 or 40 people that are really active. So I think that's probably a good number.
I see. Okay. And so in terms of 100 members, and how big of an audience are you suggesting would be big enough to be able to get the 100 members?
Yeah, I think it depends on a lot of things. Like our email list is about 6,500, 7,000 people, but people have come from all over the place to get on that list, and we don't really know a lot about who's on there. I mean, they're all people who've read our content and like it and they're engaged with us, but we're not solving a really specific problem for them. It's a general sort of entrepreneur business growth forum. I think it would be totally different if, like, I've got friends who run other forums, like Troy at WP Elevation is solving a specific problem for WordPress consultants. Brennan Dunn solving a specific problem for freelancers who want to build their own products. There's a whole bunch of people doing, and like Dan Andrews, obviously a really good example, going after lifestyle entrepreneurs who are probably a very, very good fit for a community because they're traveling around and they probably want more connection with people. So yeah, I mean, the list, I haven't really answered your question. I think it depends too much on what the community is. If it's a general community, I think to get 100 members, I think you'd probably have to have 5,000 or 10,000 people on your email list as a rough guess.
Okay. Interesting. Wow. Okay, so let's talk about some other startup validation models. What are some of the other ones out there that tend to be commonly endorsed as effective market validation strategies, and which ones have you tried? Okay,
I've tried all of them. I don't like any of them except for just starting.
Okay, so give me a list of some of these that you've tried.
Okay, well...
So we covered surveys.
Yeah, so, I mean, I guess I've attempted minimum viable products. I've attempted pre-selling. We could talk about pre-selling because that's one that people kind of put out there as the ultimate solution to validation. But the problem with pre-selling is, like, people do things like, if you join my community, like we're talking about communities, for example, people do something like, if you join my community, I'll give you lifetime access and I'll charge you $100 for that. And it's like, what exactly are you testing? Like, the whole point of lean startup and just lean startup in general, the whole point is validating your assumptions based on data. So it's creating a test and working out what the result is for that test. So if you tell someone you'll get a massive discount and I'll give you lifetime access, not only are you completely preventing that person from purchasing from you ever again, which is crazy because they're probably your best customer, but you're also offering them a deal that you're not going to offer anyone else. So all you're really testing is their desire to take you up on this deal that you can't repeat anywhere else. So, like, you're not validating anything, really. You're just kind of getting a bunch of money, which is fine, although ethically probably questionable in some cases, maybe even legally questionable, but it's not really validation. I think it really depends on the product, but I think most things you can actually launch a lot quicker than you think. Like the last 3 ideas we launched them all within 1 week, and that includes WP Curve and our community and a WordPress plugin. And I know other people have launched SaaS apps within 1 week, and I guess we'll talk about that later with the 7-day thing. But I think if you can launch quicker and then just start making decisions based on actual data from real customers, then that's really the only validation. Because everything up until that point is assumptions, and there's a rough chance they'll be right, but in my experience, almost all of the time they've been wrong.
Yeah, I think also the pre-selling thing tends to work if you have a list of people to pre-sell to. But I think for a lot of early-stage entrepreneurs, they don't have an email list. Or maybe they do have an email list, but it's out of their personal address book. So that's not really a good starting point, right? So how do you pre-sell something if you have no one to pre-sell it to?
Well, yeah. I mean, the thing is that everything's easier once you've got an email list. So I think it's a good idea. That's why I like content marketing so much, is because I was able to build up that email list while I was working on my first, like my software product a year ago. The product wasn't going well, but my content was going well, and I was getting lots of email opt-ins. And then when it came to launching WP Curve, I had a list to market to. So I think that's an important thing to do, no matter what way you're approaching your business. It's definitely a good idea to have an email list, and everything becomes easier when you've got an email list. Validation is way easier. Launching new products is easier, and getting feedback, getting testimonials for your products, everything is just much, much easier when you've got an email list.
Even if your email list is not related to your new product or company?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
I mean, even something like we launched our community in 7 days, right? So in that 7 days, we wanted a landing page, and we wanted that landing page to have some proof elements built into it. Now, we can't have testimonials from current members saying how good the community is because the community doesn't exist. But we can have other proof elements. So we've got things in there like comments from people about me or about Alex. And so we built that page around, we're two guys starting this community. This is who we are. Will you join us? Become a founding member. And we had 15 testimonials on that landing page, and all of them, some of them from really well-known people, and all of them just saying good things about me and Alex. And that all comes about by having an audience to talk to. So even if that audience really has nothing to do with the community, that was still useful for us in that case to just give us some testimonial that kind of lifted the proof on that page.
So you can take an old like LinkedIn endorsement and put it on your page, or do you actually go out and solicit brand new, fresh testimonials?
You could do either, but we asked people who knew were fans of our content or who were on our email list or who'd previously said nice things about us but in a different context, and we went out and said, we're starting this community. Can we have just a sentence saying what you like about us? And it was really easy for us to get 15 testimonials in a week.
I love it because testimonials really do build trust. And I think a lot of people kind of get a little hung up about how to get testimonials, but it's actually a lot easier than you think.
Yeah, and again, it's easier if you've got an email list. And I know some people listening might not have that, but if that's the case, then at least they've got one call to action out of this episode, which is to go and sign up with MailChimp and start an email list.
So in terms of other startup validation models, okay, for those that don't have the email list, I've come across this advice, which is buy the traffic. So either like run Facebook ads or, do like Google AdWords pay-per-click in order to, test your product idea. Have you tried this? Have you tried buying traffic, and how has that worked for you?
Didn't work.
Oh my God. Okay, really? Tell me why.
All right, so a few reasons. One is that AdWords really... the people that win at AdWords are the bigger companies who really have their metrics sorted out. So, like, if I've got a company that's got 10,000 customers and I know exactly what my lifetime value is and I know exactly what my on-page conversions are, then I know exactly how much it costs me to acquire a customer and how much more that is than how much they're worth. So let's say I convert at 10% on my page and cost per click is $5. My math isn't very good. So let's say that's $500 to acquire that customer. And I know the customer is worth $1,000 to me. And I know that because I've got 10,000 of them and I've been in business for 5 years. Of course, I would spend the money on AdWords. So, and in doing so, I would know that it's money well spent. But if you don't have all of that data, then what exactly are you testing? Are you sending traffic to the page, but you don't know if it's going to cost you more to acquire that traffic than they're worth to you because you don't know what your lifetime value is. So, if you're paying $5 a click and you're converting 10%, it costs you $10 $500 per customer, then does that mean your idea is valid? Well, it depends on your churn, and it depends on if you can upsell them over time or how many customers they're going to refer as a result of being your customer and how much growth that's going to result in. And you don't know any of that stuff when you're just starting out. So, that's part of it. The second part of it is AdWords is so expensive now. Like when I first read this idea was in the 4-Hour Workweek, which is probably 10 years old, I imagine. I don't know when it was written, but it's probably 10 years old, is it? 4-Hour Workweek?
I think it was something around 2006 maybe. Yeah, I can't recall. But yeah, I remember when everyone kind of jumped on the 4-Hour Workweek bandwagon and started running out to hire Indian VAs.
That's it. It's like it was kind of good content at the time, but as time's gone on, things have changed, and especially with something like AdWords. Like, it's so expensive now on AdWords. The whole landscape of paid advertising has changed now, and with things like retargeting and just the SEO and the cost of SEO and the changes there, like everything has changed so much that AdWords is so expensive that it's not cheap to get a whole bunch of traffic and send them to your page. The other thing is what exactly you're testing. Like, a lot of people will buy traffic and send them to a landing page for an email opt-in, so like a pre-launch page, and say, like, enter your email address if you want to be notified when we launch or something. But that's a horrible idea because all that's testing is whether or not someone will enter their email address. It's not testing whether or not they will buy. And what I've found is that you will convert a lot more people on that pre-sale page than you will even when your product's live, because it's a much less friction for someone to enter their email address. It's much less commitment for them to do that than it is for them to actually go through the process of paying, of signing up, testing and installing your product or using it and activating. So your conversions will go down either way after you launch, which is what I found. So anything that happens before that when you don't have the information, I think is just, it hasn't worked for me. And to me, it comes back to, like, what are you testing? And if it doesn't feel like you're testing the exact experience that you're going to offer when you launch, then the test is invalid and it's not worth doing.
Yeah, I think, it's almost a chicken or egg scenario too, because you're not going to get the data that you need unless you actually, test it on, paid traffic. But I can see where you're coming from, where, if you invest in that paid traffic, I think it's important to be really clear as to what information you're trying to get. And I think to be able to have something that you're going to offer to sell rather than, using the paid traffic to increase your email list. I mean, I think there's internet marketers that might disagree with that. I think there's a lot of internet marketers out there that actually do that as a, traffic building strategy. It's very tempting because how are you going to get traffic if you don't have any to begin with? But I think it can be a slippery slope because unless you know what you're doing, you can spend a lot of money.
Yeah, I think people don't realize how hard paid traffic is. I mean, if you're a paid traffic expert, then cool. But that's sort of like saying, I know nothing about writing a blog and I'm going to get my traffic by putting up a few blog posts and, I'm going to get 10,000 visitors just by doing that. And that kind of sounds ridiculous to someone who's spent, a decade writing content. And I'm sure someone validating their startup with AdWords who's never used paid traffic before sounds ridiculous to someone who lives and breathes paid traffic every day.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's somebody's full-time job. AdWords is somebody's full-time job. Facebook is another person's full-time job. Sometimes you get someone that does, everything. But yeah, it's easily just one aspect of paid traffic is easily one person's full-time, six-figure job.
Yeah, the thing is that any of these things are actually really hard. Even with an established business, they're actually really hard to pull off and do profitably. So if you think about Facebook ads or Google ads or conference presenting or content marketing, really any form of marketing, even if your business has got a proven product market fit, it's still very difficult to work out a scalable way to do those marketing activities after you launch and after you're already established. It's not easy. And so to try and do them before when you don't know any of the numbers and try to get some real data of that, it kind of seems crazy to me.
Okay, so we mentioned minimal viable product, and that is basically a concept that comes out of Eric Ries's book, The Lean Startup. Is that correct? Or who coined that term? Do you know?
Yeah, I mean, as far as I know, he got a lot of his stuff from Steve Blank. What was the book he wrote? I'm sure someone listening will know the name of the book that Steve Blank wrote before The Lean Startup. But I think it was pretty academic. I mean, if you don't consider The Lean Startup to be academic. But I think Steve Blank's book was even more so academic, and I think Eric Ries was mentored by Steve Blank and sort of took a lot of those ideas and put them into practice at his own company and then applied some of those learnings as a consultant in a bunch of other companies. So, yeah.
So
anyway.
Tell us what a minimal viable product actually is.
Right. So I'll tell you what it's not to start with. It's not a really crappy version of your product. And that's, I think, what people think it is. And the problem with that is that no one wants to buy a crappy version of your product. So good luck validating with that. But I think a minimum viable product is the least amount of work you can do in order to get a customer and start getting data from that customer. And maybe I need to come up with a better word other than data, because I'm not talking about like scientific experiments that need a certain amount of, responses to be valid. I'm just talking about like having a real customer that's paying you, and therefore whatever they're telling you or whatever they're doing, probably more to the point, is something worth paying attention to. So the smallest amount of work you can do to get a paid customer. In our case, our minimum viable product was me with a phone very close to my head as I went to sleep at night, the live chat app on that phone, and every time it buzzed, I would wake up and chat to whoever was on the other end, because my idea was 24/7 WordPress support, and I couldn't test that idea unless I offered 24/7 WordPress support. So,
oh my God, is that why you're so responsive?
Not now.
Because you don't sleep?
Yeah, it was in the first month before Alex came on board.
Sounds crazy making.
Well, I knew it was going to be temporary. It was kind of funny the way me and Alex met, because I did have a big problem at the time where I just didn't want to sleep with my phone on my head anymore, and he came along and solved that for me. But I was planning on hiring a developer over that side of the world, because I had developers on this side of the world. But, I mean, it's fine. I mean, for 3 weeks or something, it was a very good way to test the actual service. I mean, people could think, okay, well, a minimum viable product might be, okay, we offer 24/7 WordPress support, but we don't actually offer that right now. You can just sign up for half the price and you can only get business hours WordPress support, and then we'll see how many people sign up. The problem with that is, again, what are you testing? You're not testing the offer. And I wanted to test the actual offer. This is how much you have to pay. This is what you get. And I wanted to replicate that offer in the cheapest and quickest way I could. And I could do that within 3 days by putting up a very cheap WordPress site and having a free live chat app on my phone.
Okay, so, but that worked. So it seemed like your minimal viable product for WP Curve was a startup validation strategy that worked for you.
Well, I guess my point is that I launched in 3 days. So the validation, if you want to call it that, happened after I launched. And that's my problem with validation, is if you're doing it before you launch, then it's a problem. But if you've launched and you're trying to work out whether or not you've got product market fit, then that's kind of a different question. So normally when people talk about validation, they're talking about validating the idea. But after you launch, it becomes a matter of finding product market fit, which is like what you're offering, how much you're charging, and does the market want to pay that? And where's the sweet spot for you to sit? And that's not really validation. It's not really validating an idea. My idea would have been unvalidated, I guess, if I launched and I was live and I didn't have any customers, then I think I would have unvalidated my idea. But I don't think I ever really validated it. I mean, I think I just launched and gradually improved the service and gradually sort of found that product market fit, and we continue to do that. I mean, we're confident now we've got a good business, but it's just a continual process of making sure what we're doing is what people want for the price that they have to pay for it.
Okay, so it seems like my takeaway from this conversation with you, given that you've tried so many different ways to validate a market, is to just friggin' launch the product first.
That's it. I mean, I'm writing a book about it. I'm writing a book it's called The 7-Day Startup. So if you do want to learn how we launch these things so quickly, then that's my point of view, is that I just think the rest of the stuff is not really testing the right information. And most things you can launch in a week. I mean, some things you just literally can't, but most of the stuff we're talking about, like the kind of bootstrapped companies that we talk about, the communities or small software apps or WordPress plugins or service-based stuff, you can launch them a lot quicker than you think if you just think about what is the easiest way for me to get this in the customer's hands. And when I think about my last company, which was a software app, I could have launched that in 1 week as well. I could have not built the software app and just gave people a login, and when they requested a report, put up a message saying your report will be delivered in 1 hour, and I could have sat there and manually worked on the report, and it would have achieved the exact same thing that I achieved after 12 months and about $60,000 by telling me that the idea wasn't a good idea.
Oh gosh, okay. Here's the key though. Okay, you just freaking get your product done and launch it, but to whom? Where do you find your customers?
Well, I think it's going to depend a lot on, like, for me, my skill set is content. So what I would do was probably a lot different to what someone else would do. I could probably give you answers from both people's point of view. If we launch a WordPress plugin, what I would do is go out for the next month after I launch, and I'd probably set myself a really aggressive goal. Like, I'd probably set myself a goal to write maybe 100 blog posts in a month, and I'd put them on a whole bunch of, maybe 100 pieces of different forms of content, interviews like this and blog posts. I'd put some on my own blog, and I'd put most of them on other people's blogs. And then I'd be pretty confident that within a month, within say 3 weeks after launch, I'd have enough traffic to work out whether or not anyone wants to buy my stuff. What my co-founder would probably do is go to every startup event in San Francisco and talk to as many people as he possibly could in that space, and he'd try to build relationships with the people in that area and try to leverage their audience already. And when we work together, it tends to work well, because he'll go out, like he went to the Sean Ellis meetup the other day, the Growth Hackers meetup, and he'll get up the front and hustle his way to get in Sean's face and ask him to come on our podcast, and then I'll organize the content for the podcast. And so I think it's a matter of doing what you do. For me, content. For my co-founder, it's hustling, face-to-face networking. For someone else, it might be paid traffic. It might be just ringing people. But yeah, I think as long as what you're doing comes from a point of, I'm trying to get customers for this company that exists already, then I think you'll find that you'll get a return pretty quickly on that work. The problem is, I think what a lot of people do is, what they're doing is not aiming at getting customers to pay them for what they're doing. It's something else. Like, it's trying to build an audience, or it's trying to build networks or whatever. But if you want to, within a month after launching, want to get enough people to buy your product, then you'll be focused on doing whatever it is to get people to pay. And that's why an efficient way to do it, because your focus changes from, do you think this is a good idea, through to, will you pay for my product?
I see. Okay, so you would launch the product and then write 100 blog posts and get them all placed in different higher traffic blogs to try to drive that targeted traffic to your site.
That's what I would do because that's the way I've found that I can do marketing. That's the only form of marketing I'm good at. So that's what I would do, yeah.
Okay. So I just want to be able to wrap things up. I have some questions from the audience / peanut gallery. So first off is, in your entrepreneurial journey, was there one mistake that you made that if you had the chance you'd do differently?
Acting on assumptions. It was every mistake I made.
Okay. All right, great. Questions from our shared community. Matt Newton of Web Agency Podcast wants to ask you where you find your web developers for WP Curve.
Yep, so we have 2 different places in the world where we hire developers. So we've got developers in South America who look after that side of the world, and we've got developers in the Philippines that look after my side of the world. Depending on, my first developer was with me with my agencies for about 3 years. He's a gun developer and he's our lead developer. The others have either come by emailing people via job boards in the Philippines. So I'm signed up to bestjobs.ph, and when we need a new developer, we'll go on there. I'll set out all the requirements. I'll email a bunch of people that look suitable, normally more than you'd think. I mean, I don't just sort of email one person. I don't sit there and wait for applications. I'll email a bunch of people. We'll offer all of them a trial, and it'll be a paid trial. And again, it's a matter of what you're testing. If you interview someone, what are you really testing? You're testing their ability to talk to you. But what I want to test is whether or not they can do the job. So we make them do the job and we pay them for it. And if they can do the job, they get the job.
Okay. Yeah, it's a really great way to do it. You know, when I hire offshore contractors, I usually have them do some kind of little test that indicates that they have the skills to do what I'm trying to hire them for. I think it's key, absolutely key. Otherwise, you can waste a lot of time on people that aren't really a good fit.
Yeah, well, the other thing we do is we've got a set process that is the exact same process that every developer goes through. So our lead developer went through it and all of our other developers go through it. And we've got a score that we give people based on how well they go. We've got like a traffic light system where on each particular task, they either did it correctly or they didn't get to it, or they kind of half did it correctly. And based on that, we've got scores for all our developers. So not only can we look at how they perform in the trial, but we can look at 6 months down the track when we know, we really know whether or not they're one of our best developers or they didn't make it. What was the score on that initial exam, and what were the questions that worked, and how did that benchmark against whoever's doing the quiz at the moment?
Is this public? Like, do they all know? Can they all see each other's scores, or is it just for you guys?
No. It's just for us. I mean, I'm sure they don't even know we're scoring it. We just give them a Google Doc that says, these are the 15 tasks, get through as many as you can, and ask us on Skype. And we're testing every aspect. Like, we're not just testing, can you do programming? We're testing what they would do on the job, which is, these are 15 small fixes. You have to do them. You have to write development notes. You have to communicate with our project manager while you do the tasks. It's an exact replica of what would happen on the job. So it tests for all sorts of stuff. I mean, it tests for how reliable their internet connection is and whether they have blackouts all the time. And, it's not just a skills test. It's testing what they will do on the job, which I think is why it works.
Okay, so Chris Kirkland of artweb.com wants to ask, have you measured any correlation between the growth of your businesses and the growth of your beard?
I have, and I've released a post on it, and you can find that on my site. I'll give you it's actually really funny because I shaved my beard about 3 or 4 months ago, and the last 3 or 4 weeks have been like that. We've still been growing and things are going well, but they haven't been like as fiery as like the first month of the year or the end of last year. So I do think there is a massive correlation, and there is a blog post on my site.
We'll include it in the show notes.
That talks about the revenue growth versus the beard growth, so you can check that out and definitely start growing a beard if you want to grow your business.
Okay, so Josh Plotkin had a life-changing shamanic experience in Brazil over Christmas that has shown him the power of beards. He'd like to ask you whether your beard is your source of power.
Yeah, absolutely. Easy answer.
Okay, cool. So is what you're doing right now part of your life purpose? If so, how is it? Does it express your life purpose? And if it isn't, then what is your life purpose?
Well, I think I don't know about life purpose. I might not think about that enough to give you a good answer, but I think what I love doing is creating, and what I love doing, or even more, is inspiring other people to create. And I think we do that. I mean, we do a lot of content. We help people with their sites and get them to create more content. We try to inspire people with the guests we interview and get them to think about how they can improve their business and create better things in the world. So I think we do it at a scale which is about 1/1,000,000th of what I would like to do it at. So I think we're doing the right things, but I would definitely prefer to do it at a much bigger scale.
Okay, so how can we best stay in touch with you?
Right. Well, check out startupchat.co, and on there we have a live podcast every week. We have the community I mentioned. We've got interviews on there with some amazing entrepreneurs, Neil Patel, Charlie Hone, Chris Ducker, Sean Ellis, and guys like that. So that's probably, if you're interested in this entrepreneurial stuff, check that out. Otherwise, wpcurve.com is the WordPress business, and my email is dan@wpcurve.com if you want to ask any questions.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been fun.
Thanks, folks, for listening to the Entrepreneurs for a Change podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please help us reach more people with inspiring stories like this one by giving us a 5-star rating in iTunes. If this podcast inspires you to join the movement of change-making entrepreneurs, we'd love to give you a jumpstart with our free Business Changemakers Toolkit, which you can download at www.entrepreneursforachange.com/join. If you have a changemaker in mind you'd love for us to interview, go to entrepreneursforachange.com/suggest and tell us who and why. Finally, feel free to stop by facebook.com/entrepreneursforachange to share your thoughts and say hello.